Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HSEL Nationals. We're here with the finals of chess. We have had so many incredible games over this weekend, and now finally, we are here with the best of the best. These two competitors have come in so incredibly well, have beaten tough opponent after tough opponent, and have made it now to the promised land, to the finals. But only one can take the trophy, can take the victory, and can call themselves the national champion. We have Nog8Ness and we have the Mad Irish, and only one is going to be our champion. My name is K-Wing, and I'm here with Dara. Dara, are you as excited as I am to see these two incredible competitors face off?
I sure am, yeah. And this is actually going to be a fairly interesting set because to get up until this point, I was able to bear witness to Nog8Ness yesterday going up against Vibrant Broccoli. And the Mad Irish, or also known as like Callahan, knocked down Vibrant Broccoli to elimination side, to lower side, where Nog8Ness is like successful in coming on top, right? So these are the two players I'm fairly familiar with at this point. It's going to be exciting to see them go head to head. And yeah, so they have like a similarity in that they both faced off against the same opponent to get up until this point. This is going to be a finals match. There's not going to be any bracket reset or anything, so they only need to win just this one best of five to be able to take it all. Now, I want to like maybe mention maybe some sort of like stylistic differences between them going into this match. I feel like something that really jumped out at me yesterday when I got to see Nog8Ness play is that they responded to aggression and pressure really, really well with like very, very quick opening games with like the first 6, 7, 8 moves. They know exactly when they're just ahead in positioning. They know when to be able to go through those aggressive trades, and they're extremely willing to do so as well. So I am going to be curious if we're going to be seeing that super like high paced, high trading match. We're going to be seeing like queens being traded, bishops, knights from the beginning, or if we're going to see something a little bit more slowly paced between these two today.
That is the question now. As we wait to get our two competitors started on the first game, you cannot overstate how important that this game has to be. This first game to set the tone and to really just any lead that you can get to in a series of chess, a game that is, especially when you're talking high ranked players like these guys, sometimes prone to draws. It can be very, very important to see some early wins, to get one early win
Yeah.
and to put your opponent behind, so that even if we go all the way, drawing all the way, that you have that advantage. That is how important this first game is, not to mention just generally setting the tone for the entire series. It's pretty scary for these two players, but they have shown some grace under fire the entire time. I mean, we casted Callahan, aka the Mad Irish, and that series was neck and neck the entire way for them to get to the finals. But here they stand.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point that I wanted to bring up as well. We did not actually witness any like 3-0 sweeps. Every single set that the two of us have casted has gone to game five. It's been game five consistently. It's been super, super tense. Nobody was like decisively winning, even if somebody got like a really huge lead off of a blunder in like the mid game. So I feel like this just like really speaks to it. Like there is a very like high level of talent. The ratings for both of these players speak for themselves, of course. They're excellent at what they do, and their gameplay shows that off. Every single game, every single match, it can go either way up until the very last moment, until somebody just makes the very slight mistake. That's kind of what I got to see a little bit of yesterday as well from like Nog8Ness's play as well. When you go through a lot of those like high trading, like early to mid games, you're just sort of waiting for your opponent to make a mistake, and that's where like the timer really comes into play, right? Manipulating and knowing how to control your own clock is so 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 important. in a format like this. But it does seem like we are going to be getting into game number one here already. Both of them going to be just castling over, no pieces taken, no pieces lost yet, and they're already making plays at the center. They're just getting all of the opening moves out of the way, and now it's time for us to get into the game.
Yeah, and that we are already some aggressive center taking from Callahan. That knight is very, very scary as it gets traded out, and that bishop even scarier, pointed directly at that G7 king side, looking for pinning that knight right to that really important square, and the aggression already coming out from Callahan, developing this
Oh, yeah.
queen and getting a already a threatening position. But Nog8Ness has a pretty interesting queen side that could be developed if they're looking for potentially a bit of counterplay.
Yeah, for sure. And this is about the time where we have to start looking for the counterplay, right? Because we're looking at that knight, we're looking at that black bishop, we're looking at that white bishop as well on behalf of Nog8Ness, neither of which are actually looking particularly strong in the moment. They don't have a lot of places to go, and we're seeing Callahan take full advantage of that. But what Nog8Ness has now, they've slightly opened up the pawn structure a little bit already, having your pawn sitting at d4 like that, so aggressive, backed up by that queen, gonna actually go for the knight trade, which I think is really important here because Nog8Ness right now is just trying to open this position up to feel a little bit less boxed in. I think that was a very good trade.
Yeah, it really was just such a great trade to come in, and I'm interested to see with how this with how aggressively Callahan is pointing this bishop and this queen toward that king side, whether this bishop pair from Nog8Ness on e7, e6, that's a very scary place for those bishops to be. They have some very good sightlines coming in down to Callahan's king side, and that's exactly what you want to see, is that queen coming in, charging up the e6 bishop and threatening bishop h3 to potentially make some very sad white squares open up to some aggression from Nog8Ness.
Yeah, for sure. Right now, I feel like the biggest thing I'm looking at is going to be like those rooks, right? Trying to get them into the play of the game a little bit here. If you can hammer down this E file as Callahan, I think that's going to be like especially powerful. A queen atop a rook like that just gives you like so much potential to go for like a lot of really nasty plays, a lot of revealed pressure as well. And I feel like that's going to be a powerful move. But we did talk about just now, like the queen moving up to d7. What this is effectively doing is it's giving the queen that maneuverability to go down that diagonal, white line. It's giving a lot of pressure. It's giving a lot of control here. This white bishop and this like queen in tandem together, they're just creating a lot of threatening space that now Callahan has to figure out how will I maneuver around this.
That's the problem here, and Callahan knows that this is a tough position to get through, taking the most time that they have in this entire game. You've seen Callahan make very, very quick moves. We're talking 1 second, maybe just a bit of 2 seconds. Now taking a minute for queen takes b7, threatening out that exchange of the queen, and that exchange will be accepted with some quick answers. Still even. Callahan is up the pawn, but this bishop is going to get removed very quickly. And you could see a bishop e4 here. Nope, going to go right back to bishop g2 to keep that safety on with that bishop. It's very powerful, like we've talked about before, but you're still keeping a very dominant bishop right in the center of the board. This king just cannot feel safe. It can't sleep soundly at night. It's got to sleep with one eye open because Callahan's bishop is right there waiting for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is that complementary pawn structure from Nog8Ness is really allowing Callahan to have like that kind of dominance on the board at the moment. But right now, backing off with the bishop of their own here, I'm interested to see like what the play is actually going to be. Right now, Nog8Ness has a little bit of tempo, starting to get some of the rooks into play. You have a pawn like that backed up behind the rook. The pawn structure is like super developed, and now it feels like Callahan is the one that is kind of boxed in on the king side here. You have to back away with your bishop. You have to run away. And Callahan is now being taken full advantage of as Nog8Ness is further advancing this pawn structure. If that's not even like a piece that you want to take, right? The rook can easily swoop in. And that's going to be a rook now all the way on the 4 file. This is a good position for Nog8Ness.
It absolutely is a great position for them here, as these rooks are starting to get into their own, and very scary, very, very scary right now. I mean, this, like, you have the potential for a lot of rook maneuvers, some open files that could end up being very, very scary. I mean, the pawn push onto g5 had to be done, but at this point you're a little scared of how much pressure it's putting onto your king, onto this back rank. You have to be very careful because you cannot push forward. This king is effectively trapped right now in that back rank, so you cannot get too aggressive. But the rook battery is showing up down on the c file.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I feel like right now what could be really, really huge, there is a potential for a fairly good pin on the pawn that is sitting at f2, but alas, that is not going to be an option at the moment. You're going to have to respond in some shape or form to that rook pressure. Granted, you do have the pawn backing up that bishop sitting at e6, so maybe not the most relevant at this moment in time. But if you can push that white rook up all the way to e5 and start pressuring that pawn that's sitting out there, that can also be huge. Now just going to be offering up the bishop trade. This would be a good trade for Nog8Ness. They're getting rid of that black bishop, which has just had so much presence this entire game, and that's going to be basically a rook completely uncontested at that point in time. So I feel like this is a trade that might not necessarily go in Callahan's favor, but they're going for it.
I mean, they have to at that point. There was nothing else they could do. They pinned, Nog8Ness pinned that bishop to the rook. If they rejected that trade, the rook would have been gone, and there was nothing that Callahan could do. It's still a toss-up. It's still anyone's game, but that bishop, like you said, had so much presence, and that fourth trade is devastating for a Callahan. Definitely a bishop they wanted to keep on the board, which is now all but gone.
That was a very important pawn push from Callahan just now, mind you, right? Because had Nog8Ness decided to take the pawn that was sitting at b2, that would have been like even further decimating that pawn structure. Nog8Ness would have really gone up in points at that point in time. So now the question is, will they take the rook trade? They will not actually offer it up at this point in time. Gonna maybe go for it again. Still trying to contest it over and over again. Callahan wants to get that rook off of them.
That they do, and at this point you really can't blame them, as with how scary these rooks have been for Nog8Ness. They cannot abide by keeping them on the board, and now you got to be very, very scared if you're Callahan, because you have had these two rooks are very terrifying. There is a possibility
this is no longer
of
a trade that you can make at this point, right? Because if Nog8Ness, or excuse me, if Callahan does ignore this position for a little bit longer, you come in and you take that rook, you're going to go for the trade, and you know what's going to happen? Well, it's going to be Nog8Ness that is not only up a rook, and then also almost creating the checkmate. The only move would be to block with the bishop, excuse me. So you got to find a way to disengage right now. You got to find a way to be able to get this pressure off of you. You have to somehow put a little bit of pressure onto Nog8Ness, but it doesn't look like Callahan has a lot of options at this point.
It is very, very it's very hard to look at this for Callahan, because there's so much pressure here that's going to be coming through.
Yep.
And that's how long it took. You have to just play bishop f3, give your bishop an escape, but also give your king an escape, but also protect your rook.
Yeah, super, super smart there. Love the way that you put that as well, right? You're giving yourself like that insurance option as well. Whenever you do a king side castle, it is so, so, so important that that g2 square or that g7 square respectively is opened up. That is how you avoid like that queen going down on the one file. That's how you avoid a rook going down on that one file as well. So it helps you not be as boxed in. And of course, Callahan is now protecting their pieces a little bit more as well.
Yeah, we might see some very interesting. We might see some I'm interested to see how No Greatness is going to be
Mhm.
dealing with that exchange. We're going to see an A5 push.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think about like
Yeah.
why that was necessarily the decision at that point. Maybe trying to break up that structure a little bit. That's at A2 and at B3 might be a little bit helpful because then it allows you to have some more maneuverability with your rooks as well. I feel like not a bad play for No Greatness either would be to maybe throw that bishop onto something like G4. If you can offer but then you can't really get your rook out of the way because then you're going to be losing a rook of your own. So I did lie. I did end up lying though. That's okay though. Or you know what? Even putting your bishop at d5, excuse me, to maybe sort of force that bishop out of the way, go for that kind of a trade. That could be powerful because that is the only thing currently stopping No Greatness from sort of going for those big rook trades.
Yeah, we could also see on the side of on Callahan's side, we might see the king move over to try and get this rook off of that second file because it at this point that rook there, or we might just see the
Ah,
queen exchange coming in and the bishop moving over down to D1 is very interesting. I
it's safe, right?
it
It's
is.
safe.
It
You're
certainly
gonna get rid of
is.
that piece altogether. You each trade like a rook and a bishop. Right now, Callahan is like kind of like up point wise, but it feels like we're getting into that same minimalistic game that we have seen yesterday and the day before, right? Everybody is so keen to trade. Everybody is so keen to get this to the last couple of pieces, and now this is where a single blunder will cost you the entire game. So this is where No Greatness decides, hey, I need to get my king into play. I need to somehow box in this king as well. I need to be able to put a little bit more pressure in because the biggest thing that No Greatness has is just how limited the mobility is for Callahan. That rook effectively can't go anywhere. It wasn't ever activated, right? It was never taken out of that A1 spot. And as a result, its presence in the game is kind of lackluster.
That it is. And with the threat now, it's very, very dangerous now for Callahan with the rook putting a lot of pressure on this this A1 pawn or A2 pawn, pardon. You are in essence pinning this rook into place. Otherwise, this pawn is going to get captured, and it looks like that rook will be moving right out of position, which will leave that B pawn threatened as well. Rook will move up to C5, but you're still running into some problems if bishop takes B3 into that rook. That
Oh
pawn
yeah.
is still protected by the rook, and you're going to be down the pawn, and an A pawn is not it's not a guaranteed um push. Even if all the material is traded off, the A pawn you cannot force that. You can't force promotion there. It draws, I
Yeah.
think, if you get the king in the corner. But now we're looking at um, some interesting play on the king side with an exchange coming in. I'm I'm interested to see how they handle this sort of standoff on the queen side, or if it gets handled. Really, uh, oh
I
no,
mean, honestly,
yeah,
at this point, you could be basically playing for points here. You could go for like the queenside pawn trade if you push up that pawn all the way on to a4, but we're actually not going to see that. We're going to see a
that's
really
smart.
powerful pin instead, just limiting that bishop for a second. Callahan had to respond defensively and losing just a little bit of tempo. Now starting to chase them down little bit by bit. That king is slowly approaching No Greatness's own king, just pushing it up that much further. If you can sort of scare that white rook away, if you can kind of get it out of there in time, you might be able to make a huge play happen. Super powerful move afoot. This is going to be the opening to sort of get that rook out of the 3 file if you can get that check, right? But at that point, you are forced to move the king away. You don't want to be checked like that because then you can't take that pawn that the rook is originally protecting at a5. Ooh.
And there comes the exchange now with a lot of really interesting king moves here. just evened up again, as I'm really interested to see how this is going to be handled.
Yeah, blocking with the pawn there is super smart. You don't want to go back anymore because that's not going to really allow you to develop your pawns at that point. You're going to have to back off now. That's going to be another check. This is where the king sort of gets boxed in. This is huge potential for a stalemate at this point if they do so choose to do that. Callahan's not going to be playing for that. Callahan wants to play aggressively, wants to box in that king as well, taking the aggression here. I don't think you have a lot of moves left at this point. You have to respond defensively. You have to get out of that check, and now is going to be another huge check opportunity.
Yeah, and especially with how aggressive Callahan is going, this rook is there, but there's so much pressure, and you've lost everything for Nog8Ness. That is all of your pawns. You just have the rook. This pawn is complete. There's the h5 pawn completely passed away, and now it's not looking good for Nog8Ness.
Yeah, no, not at all. You are down in pawns at the moment where you need them most, right? Gonna be blocked there. You can't even go for any rook trades at this point. You cannot go down like that at all. You can't even come in and take that pawn. I gotta say, this isn't looking so good for Nog8Ness. I feel like this game is gonna be a lap, especially with that promoted queen. But you know what? Still trying to get that check going here. But you don't have a lot less. You don't have a lot else going for you at this point.
No, and the crucial thing is that Nog8Ness can't go for the trade. It's mate in 2, fourth right now. We'll have to see if Callahan can immediately find it. Is the question. There you go, mate in 1, checkmate, and Callahan will take that first round. Moving into the second with Callahan on now the black pieces, you have to think how they might respond.
Yeah. I gotta say, I feel like this was a game that was defined by the pawns. Specifically, those two black pawns that Nog8Ness had pushed all the way up. I believe it was on like b3 and like c4 or something like that. They were in such a confident and comfortable position. Callahan played against that super, super well, got rid of those pawns, and all of a sudden, all of that development that Nog8Ness had, that really beautifully developed structure, all of that pressure, and always, of course, with the threat and with the threat to actually promote those pieces. That was a game decided and won by pawns, right? At the end of the day, Callahan is the one that responded to that well, took a couple of pawns, was able to get a promotion, and then did a classic, like, double lane close with a rook and a queen. So that was really, really well played from Callahan. I'm trying to think of exactly how did Nog8Ness end up losing those pawns, end up losing all of the positioning. Another place that I didn't necessarily love is what happened with the rook and the bishop. When we saw Callahan actually go and protect that white rook with the bishop, all of a sudden those two rooks that Nog8Ness had weren't nearly as strong. But we are going to be going into game number 2. Callahan is now up 1-0 against Nog8Ness. Of course, the sides have been switched. Let's see what Nog8Ness can do.
Yeah, already we're going into the King's Indian defense. And at this point with the King's Indian defense, it's an aggressive opening for black now. So Callahan, again, just showing off how aggressive they want to be, where both sides have sort of encountered these bishops and are playing very, very, are looking for these long sort of sight lines or these long control from their bishops, especially with Nog8Ness with his bishop on c1, even undeveloped. It has so much pressure as now the center is getting blown wide open with some interesting trades. You have both those e-pawns matched up. This center is sort of
a queen trade. They're good at queen trade, aren't they? I
don't
know.
know.
I smell it in my bones. They keep on going for those trades, man. That is like my number one instinct here. They're looking each other down. They're gonna probably try to go for like the minimalistic, super high trade gameplay that we have seen like thus far.
They might, but at this point, keeping the queen staring at each other like this is fine for the both of them, but the pressure is going to come in from that choice. Neither of them really wanted to move that queen off the d file to give that other queen an open, just complete control over the entire d column. But with that pressure from the bishop from Callahan, Nog8Ness is going to be forced over to c2, a really a fairly ineffective spot for this queen to be at, putting some
Yeah.
pressure on, not controlling much in the way of space, whereas Callahan has this entire D column open to them, just ready and waiting for a potential rook lift, for a potential double rook lift, whatever they want. There's so much pressure there, including with that bishop
Oh
on
yeah.
g4. D1 is getting absolutely hammered by Callahan.
But then Callahan ends up actually backing off here, maybe just trying to defend that pawn that's sitting at e5 a little bit more here. I think that was an interesting play. I'm trying to think about why there's not like a lot of pressure currently exerted, but maybe Callahan is just trying to get sort of that like first step going in this process. Now, forcing the bishop to back away just a little tiny bit here, developing some of their pawns as well. Going to be further tucking the king away into the corner, maybe trying to avoid a potentially lethal check that would be coming in. If the queen was moved to b6, you would only be able to block with a pawn, and even then you couldn't get much else. Now actually going to be going for the rook trade here. Really interesting play, popping out with a rook of their own yet again. I feel like this would not be the most awful rook trade if Nog8Ness decides to go for it as well. The only consequence being you are putting that queen back on that super powerful d file. But that's going to be it. That's going to be the rook trade. No more rooks this game at all. Super, super different from the last game. Yeah, this one's just really different in its pacing.
Yeah, especially since we've been keeping the queens on the board, we're seeing a different sort of set of tactics from both of these players as they now look for a very different set of moves and a different form of aggression playing with the queen. It's a lot, there's a lot more, it's a lot more, there's a lot more aggression that can happen with just how much the queen can get into really how much control the queen has over the board. But you also have some potentially very, it's high risk, high reward.
Yeah. Also, really huge play there from Nog8Ness, right? Moving the queen over to that d file again. You're going to have to force that queen to kind of move away because you really don't want that knight pinned, right? So that's going to be moving away. That's going to be still protecting the knight and making sure that your queen is not locked down in that really uncomfortable position. This game is really going to be decided by that d file. They went through those early pawn trades in the beginning. They completely opened this lane up, and now it is Nog8Ness who like snatches away control of it again.
Yeah, and you do have a little bit better control of the center for Nog8Ness, allowing them a bit more freedom with how much control these pieces have. An interesting sort of development with going bishop a3, putting a lot of pressure on this king side for Callahan, and still just even up here for both of these players. You're looking for a trade sort of offered now by Callahan, attempting to trade off both of their bishops, looking for a bit of an advantageous trade because this dark squared bishop is going to have a lot of trouble navigating Callahan's pawns, but it is going to be accepted there.
Yeah.
As
I mean,
I was interested with that because that dark squared bishop has a lot of trouble navigating this center where a lot of the pawns are on these dark squares, but Nog8Ness trades their dark squared bishop who
yeah.
doesn't have that same problem on their side of the board.
I was going to say that black bishop that was sitting at a3 was so powerful, specifically because of the fact that it limited the queen's mobility. That trade that Callahan offered and then it was like ended up like being accepted was really important because either A, worst case, you force the bishop back to like something like b2 or something like c1, where you no longer have as much control and the queen is allowed to move, or you offer up the trade, hey, you know what, you're really relieving a lot of this position and you're giving your queen a little bit more room to be able to play with again. Now we're going to be seeing Callahan push up a little bit with their knight here. Going to be tossing it on over to e6. Really asserting control of the center again. This is just about of an even game as we could hope. The only thing that I can see as a difference is the difference in the bishops between the two. For Callahan, that white bishop I mean, it is protecting the knight. It is nestled in a comfy spot, but it still has a lot of presence, especially if you move that knight again. Whereas, I gotta say, that white bishop for no greatness is not looking as strong. It's protecting a fairly nestled in pawn, but it doesn't have a lot of places to go. I think a pretty good place for that bishop would actually to it would be an aggressive move, but to go for h3. You are going to threaten the knight, which has a lot of control of center, but instead, we're just going to be seeing the movement from the knight. Interesting.
We are, and putting in a lot of pressure onto potentially gaining some tempo uh, with a move of knight h6 or potentially even knight f6, just getting a lot of control. And especially with the exchange of that dark squared bishop, Callahan doesn't have a lot of options to stop that gain of tempo.
Yeah.
And if you get knight f6, the only move that doesn't immediately lose you the pawn is moving king h8, putting your king right in that corner, which can be very scary. It does come with some risks of trying to, even if the king goes to f8, it does come with some risk if you try to take. Your knight is somewhat trapped there, but there's a lot of very scary tactics that can come in for No8Ness here as they're looking to even us up.
Yeah, that knight is in a really good spot right now, I gotta say. Putting it at f6, that's going to be a lot of control. That's going to be so much presence. And I feel like No8Ness right now also has a huge potential because of how that lane was opened up to swoop in, of course, with that queen. Putting your queen, your knight over onto h6 to maybe try to go through the check instead would be really nicely protected. Might not necessarily be a bad play either, but you don't have a lot else that you can kind of do with that at the moment. So I'm curious to see what No8Ness's next development is going to be. It is going to be the check after all, and no other pawns will be taken from this. There isn't another check opportunity, but it's still just a really good position to be in.
Yeah, and with the king in a lot more of an exposed position, there you have it, the queen coming in, and you really don't want this king to run towards the center right now. With these queens still on the board, there is a lot of opportunities to get trapped and to get just forced out into a position you really don't want to be in. And that is where Callahan is right now. Whereas No8Ness, his king is tucked into a corner, safe as can be,
Oh yeah.
as these queens on the board has looked like a bit of an advantage for No8Ness.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is also isn't a bad time necessarily for Callahan to move that queen over to something like d7, because if you can go down that lane, all of a sudden you're going to be pressuring, Greatness's king again. But of course, we're going to be seeing the back away with the knight onto g8 to escape the looming threat of losing your knight, of course. And now Callahan is just trying to get out of that situation, make sure that no forks are being made, especially when you have a lot of pieces clustered up like that and you're going up against the knight. Forks happen all the time that you have to be so cognizant of.
You really have to at this point, because with just how much this king is getting beaten forward, the only move that Callahan can make here is, well, the knight move, but it's a really weird position for this knight to be in with some potential pressure that could come in. Thankfully, all the pawns that are
That's the
near it are
move.
passed, but that is the move, putting pressure on that defense support for this knight. If that pawn takes, threat is queen takes, and then at
I mean, no
that
matter
point,
what,
that
it's opened up the bishop. That's like, I feel
yeah,
like the really huge takeaway here, right? That bishop was kind of, that white bishop I talked a little bit, it was like kind of weak, but that's the move where he's finally start to get it into the game. You finally started to get into the swing of things. Really smart to just back away at that point. If you go through this pawn take, you're going to end up doubling it up, and that bishop is still not going to be able to move. But now getting the bishop into the game itself at this point, able to get a check, further just backing off the king into the corner again. And now the question is, what do you actually do here as No8Ness? You kind of need to get rid of some of these pawns so that you can play more, but instead, just going through the trade, really huge play. Wow.
it is such a huge trade there, and now you're pushing in with some better positioning now from Callahan. This king is a
Yep.
lot safer as it is still a little bit more exposed, but you might see even king b8 to just try and get. Actually, you probably might not see king b8 just because of potential attacks on the queen to force a queen trade. But keeping this king here, you are way less susceptible to attacks as the push comes in for
Mhm.
b6 to try and strengthen this pawn chain and establish it. I'm very interested to see uh, how far this goes, as now the queen getting kicked forward. There's potentially some advantage here for Nog8Ness.
Yeah, but you have to get out of the spot though. That's the kind of the play that I was like afraid of. That would have been like a really good spot for the knight. You can't even like necessarily take here though, right? Because of course you have the pawns backing it up. This, I feel like, would not be the most awful time to go for that pawn take. You'll double it up for like a second there, but instead we're going to be seeing Nog8Ness advance the queen just a little bit more here. I'm curious what they're like looking out for. Maybe just trying to like open up a lane if there is that pawn take, but we're going to see it come into play now. Now the knight comes in and takes, still nicely protected by that pawn sitting at g3. Again, this is a game where I don't feel like either of them have a strong advantage or disadvantage. One mistake, one bad trade, one pawn lost can define this game, and that has just been like the name of the game this entire weekend.
That it is, and it's back and forth now between these two players right here. Potential advantages coming in, the pawn trying to take away some of that support from Nog8Ness's. And there's a take, potentially more advantage for Nog8Ness here, a bit positionally, as looking at some very interesting trade offer
Ooh.
now. You'll have to see if that is something that Callahan really wants to do.
Yeah, and they're gonna go through the queen trade. Sure, even in pawns, technically speaking, the position. I mean, on the left side, on the queen side, excuse me, it's completely mirrored. In fact, and now the way that they will be able to win the game is this: you have to go for a check, and you have to fork a pawn. This is going to be a game decided and won by pawns yet again. So one person going down a single point can cost them the entire game. You got to go through that promote. You have to advance them at this point in time.
You really do. And with how scary that these pawns are for Callahan on this king side, it might be maybe a bit of an advantage now going into this end game with pawns and two knights. You might see a some solid work from Callahan with these pawns, but with how threatening
Yep.
they are, there's the pre-move.
Yeah, that's going to be that. And you know what that means? That is a knight and a pawn on the king side. All of a sudden, we have a clear and open and basically undefended lane altogether. So the play is going to be what? You're going to have to try to get your knight out of there a little bit. You're going to have to back it up so that you can then advance with your pawn, of course. And now it is a race to be able to do so. It is going to be a race to advance the pawns as much as possible and avoid the next check opportunity. We're going to be seeing Callahan starts to threaten that pawn that's sitting at a2, try to get that pawn structure from the back line. So you can advance here. Yes, that is going to be the pawn going to a4 to sort of deal with that pressure. And all of a sudden, that knight does not have a lot of places to go.
Yeah, this knight is getting trapped in this back line. And with how scary the situation is for Callahan on this king side, this queen side is also not really looking too great either.
Yeah. So we're seeing the knight move away now, right? So that you can actually clear off that H file. We're going to probably start seeing that pawn advance really, really soon here. Just always maneuvering around in a type of way so that they would avoid being checked again. Now that knight is going to be swooping in there as well. I got to say, I really like Nog8Ness's position right now. This is looking a little bit more likely because of how open the files feel.
It really is so open, and very, very threatening for Nog8Ness with that H pawn, and with how far away Callahan's knight is from being able to hop into really be close. You're going to have to take 3 entire moves. It might just end up being what Callahan is going to have to do, is to try and keep this king side in check.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so moving that knight on over to c7 a little bit, just trying to like really hinder and scale away that knight, but that's going to be one little check opportunity here, and of course still able to successfully defend that pawn, make sure that the knight is not able to take anything, backing away, going to b5 at that point in time, and then also threatening the pawn that was sitting at a7. So now they're moving around a little bit more. The pawns are further developing, and I'm still looking at h4. That is where, in my mind, this game will be decided. You just need to get enough space away from Callahan in order to develop things the way that you want to.
That is it just has to be so scary right now, as this knight is just not able to put a lot of pressure onto the black pieces the way that the white knight onto the white pieces the way the black knight. Look, the pawn, the knight from Nog8Ness doing a lot more work and putting a lot more pressure onto Callahan than Callahan's is onto Nog8Ness, and there you go. There you have it again.
Yeah, that's going to be the lost pawn. That is a little bit brutal, but then, you know, Nog8Ness is still up in pawn structure, right? You still have the open file on c5. You still have the open one on g as well. This is kind of the point where you want to be advancing a little tiny bit here. And Nog8Ness is going to be doing that to the best of their ability here. Moving up with the pawn, actually ends up going for the take. This is weird. This is a weird game. I'm not going to lie. This is definitely odd.
It sure is, and with just how close that these games are going to be and how tight it is on time, we should mention 17 seconds for Nog8Ness to finish this off. One pawn left. It's not going to. It doesn't look good. It might have been a blunder there. It's even up, but there's the knight coming into check, and with how close this is,
why wasn't that the take? That should have. Well, actually, it might have resulted in a stalemate. Is that going to be the promotion? Not quite, right? Because you still have the knight there. You still have it just sitting there really pretty, really, really comfortably. So that's the promotion.
And there
that's
it is,
the
draw.
And that's going to be the stalemate. Wow, the draw, excuse me.
Yeah, that is the draw now. And because because we actually brought this up, with a game so prone to draws, the fact that Callahan won the first game outright is incredibly important, and we've had an actual disconnect come in. But we'll be right back on it to see what exactly is happening in the opening. But it's very, very interesting to see these two players square up, because right now we have just seen a really, really close game. So now the fact that the draw is coming forward, you might actually have some difficulty getting another game won. We might just see a lot of drawn games, which would end up in a Callahan victory. So all Callahan has to do, Callahan right now can play for the draws over and over and over again, and we will eventually get to a point where we're all good and we're all done, and Callahan is ends up the victor. Greatness has to play for the win. That is why Callahan played why they did.
I do forget, is a draw going to award a point for each of them, or does that not result in any points given whatsoever?
It's half a point for each. So currently we're sitting at 1.5 to 0.5. It really is.
Yeah, that's why like winning that game one is like super important, right? Because if you just go like trade and draw up and up and up and up from that point onwards, I mean, it is in Matt Eilish's favor for sure. So you can't. That's not really a privilege. That is not a luxury that you have as no greatness at this point in time, right? So going into this next game here, probably going to be seeing already a super different one, especially established with that knight structure from the very beginning here. I'm curious to see how this one is going to end up playing out.
I am too, and especially with this being best of 5 and not first to 3, it's very important to note that even if we have the next, well, it's tough. We're applying a pretty esports sort of framing to chess. Draws are not usually, you don't see a lot of draws happen in esports, but in chess, they're usually very much the lay of the land. Um, so with best of 5, by the end of 5 games, we will have to have a victor. And the problem with
We
that
got
is
places to be. We can't be here all day. This is an
we
esports, you
hey,
know.
we do have places to be, but thinking critically here, if we have no greatness win, we will have 3 games, and it will be tied at 1.5. So we will guaranteed have at least 2 more games. If not, technically, we could see 3, and we could see 3 more games, and there is a potential situation here where no greatness wins a game, no greatness wins again, Callahan wins again, and then we have a draw where it is 3-3
There's a
for
lot of
two.
ways this can go down, essentially.
There's a lot of ways this can go down, and this is why chess is a little wobbly.
It's a funny little game. That's the best way to put
Yeah,
this. We're watching a funny little game right now, especially in the pacing of this. I feel like they're fairly into the early game, and now they're being like super careful. This is a slightly unconventional position. The knights right now from No Greatness are just in a really powerful spot at this point in time. And let me tell you, that look, backing up that pawn like that, that is a really good opening for Callahan here to advance and just ends up going through the block. Super important that No Greatness did that. And now Callahan has to back off with that knight a little bit. Not in a very good position. Callahan is looking boxed in and pushed back a little bit.
yeah, which is interesting. We've usually seen Callahan take the advantage in terms of space, but now we're seeing Callahan have to navigate around some really tough space
Yeah.
and some disadvantages in terms of space, because this D4 pawn is not letting him do much of anything at this point, and you're looking for maybe trying to squeeze something out
Mhm.
on this D1 to H5 diagonal, but even then, you don't have a lot of ways if you're Callahan to attack this black king.
Yeah, definitely not a lot of wiggle room at this point. And something I do also want to make note of is how well this black bishop that's sitting at e7 is playing out for No Greatness, right? That's preventing any advancements from the pawn that's currently sitting at g3, because then the pawn that would be at h4 would end up getting taken, but we're actually going to be seeing the push up with the knight. This is, in my mind, the opportunity to start developing that pawn that is sitting at g3, right? You're successfully protecting that pawn that you had before. This is going to be the time to move up a little bit and just further ensuring the dominance and control of that pawn that is sitting at d4. That black bishop is in a really good position. Now going to be contesting with that bishop as well here. You can't really move it out of the way here because that would be a fairly advantageous trade for Callahan. This is a tense game.
It is a very tense game, especially as it's very different from the ones that we've seen beforehand, like you mentioned, with the difference in space and how No Greatness seems to be taking a bit of an aggressive stint here, as Callahan just thinking of ways to push forward. Now, as you have to be very, very careful, especially with this low space, with how much even you can see just how much of a disadvantage like having that space disadvantage is just with the stockfish calculations there being 1.5 for a completely 1.5 to 2 for a completely even game in terms of material. It's just that Nog8Ness has complete control over the entirety of their side, as well as pushing in, especially on the queen side of Callahan. Like, there's just no,
I mean,
like,
look at
everywhere's
this
a
position.
minefield.
Yeah, everything
Everywhere's
is
a
a minefield.
minefield.
This is like the point of the game where, like, hey, they listen. They both have expended 5 minutes on their clocks, and only a single pawn for each of them has been taken. This amount of tension on the board is going to result in what? A single trade, a single piece is going to be taken, and then all hell is going to break loose. We're going to be seeing trades up and up and up and down all over the place. So we're seeing the reposition from the queen here again, just putting a little bit more pressure onto that bishop. But then you're revealing pressure of your own. I will say not a great spot for this queen. I can't lie. You're gonna have to back off here unless you want to give it up for a rook.
Yeah, there's definitely no way. And putting that putting that queen on f2 is so threatening. And you have to, at some point, you can't put more and more pieces on the king side, or you might have to be worried about potentially a knight coming in and just smothered mating your king, as with how tight this king is in terms of
Doesn't have a
where
lot of
they can
places to
move.
go.
No, they can't move, and it's not due to just pieces threatening them. It is literally just there are within just a few squares, two minor
It's
pieces
that
and the
G2
queen.
square. You need to get that G2 square opened up because without it, that is exactly how you have the
Oh my
issue of
gosh.
your king being boxed in. But what's talk to me? What's happening with this pawn all the way up here? He's looking a little bit confident, isn't he?
What the pawn doing? I mean, seriously, what is that pawn doing? It's on e3, and there's nothing right now that Callahan can do. Callahan is getting hit by a steamroller right now with how aggressively with how much
No
aggression is
greatness
getting
is playing
put
here.
onto Nog8Ness, and you can't do much, as this pawn is just going to really upset any kind of movement. I mean, like, getting this pawn onto e3 and having it be relatively defensible, it will end up getting exchanged out, but for just a moment, that was terrifying
Yeah. If
for
that pawn got pushed
Callahan.
up any further, if it went to e2, it would have been disastrous, right? So this trade was really, really important. That was actually essential for Callahan. I feel like Nog8Ness overextended a little bit. I think that pawn got a little bit ambitious all the way out there. They're down fairly, quite a bit in points now. And Callahan has effectively relieved a lot of the pressure that was building up there. That look can't
Mhm.
really move out of the way at this point. I'm curious to see what Nog8Ness is going to throw out next. Getting that rook into play is going to be, in my mind, essential. Putting that down onto e8 might be really, really helpful, protected by that white bishop that's sitting at f7. Just making sure that you have another piece on the board, another piece that is actually threatening something, and just getting that rook out of the way. Oh my.
Yeah, that was what was on the board right there. That was the forest we were missing for the trees, is that exchange happened really, really intensely, not where they were content to exchange the rook for the knight there, as it
Huge.
allowed a fork to come through with that knight on c2, forking both the rooks. You were able to take a less advantageous position, and now the queen can drop in with such an advantage for Nog8Ness. The king's safety, Callahan's king, is completely unsafe now,
That
and
fork was massive. Being
that
able
fork
to
was
get that,
absolutely
and now,
massive.
boy, why not? Oh, I'm so silly. I thought, well, I was like, wait, why can't you take that look? And then I remembered, oh yeah, wait a second, there is a knight onto the board.
Knights do
But that
exist.
pawn, Look, that knight, yep, that knight is definitely out there, right? Really big play there from the pawn as well. We're seeing Nog8Ness start to develop those pawns on the queen side yet again. This is how the last game was lost, right? Or I believe it was game one, excuse me, right? So this is where you live and die. You live and die by those queen side pawns. I'm curious to see how Nog8Ness is going to play it out this time around. If you can at least force that rook to back off, if you can get that, pawn in a more comfortable spot, it'll be excellent. If you can get that promotion, it's going to be the game, in fact. So let's just see what happens.
Let's see what happens indeed. At this point, Nog8Ness has quite an advantage as the rook is going to get dropped in onto the 7th file. You have to wonder if that might be leaving the castle a bit unguarded for Callahan, but trying to alleviate this pressure, trying to find an outlet valve to divert this, but it might just not be enough as this bishop is going to move right in, trying to
So efficient.
just take away all of the minor pieces protecting the king. It's not looking good for Callahan. They're taking up a lot of time to think about these moves, and if they don't play this perfectly, they could leave their king incredibly undefended. That's an interesting threat there coming in with the battery onto the D column.
Yeah, and this is no longer an actual piece that you can take, right? The play was to maybe try to hammer down f3 to try and take that knight away, but because of that structure, you no longer have the privilege to do so, and atop that, it now has an extra layer of defense. That d file, again, the d file is where all of the pressure keeps on accumulating when you keep on going for these kingside castles, and then it's all up to that g file to actually get a bit of maneuverability and to be able to get out of there. That is a huge check. That is a huge amount of pressure that is now being put onto the board here. You have that queen and you have that rook pushed up all of the way here. You do move that queen out of the way, though, and then what's going to happen is that knight is going to get taken any day of the week. So, super, super, like, tense, super, super even game here. I want to see how this is going to resolve. And ooh, such a powerful play from that knight, being protected by both the queen and that pawn simultaneously. That is no longer a trade that you can go for at all.
Yeah, and you can definitely go for this trade, but the question is, do you really want to at this point, trading out this bishop for the knight? The knight might be a very integral part of the attack plan for Callahan, so this knight might want to be in that center position.
Honestly?
And maybe that is a trade that you want to take, but no, we're going to end up trying to push forward. Pawn takes. We might see a rook take, or we might see the pawn take. Rook take is going to be very aggressive, but we're just going to see the pawn take.
It's a protected pawn.
It's a protected pawn, and it is passed at this point. It's very terrifying, and you just have to divert either the rook or the queen to that pawn to try and put some pressure on it, but especially with where it is right now, protected by the rook, protected by the queen, there's not much that you can do in order to put pressure on it, as it has a gamut of pieces. And also with just the position the rook is in on the c file, you have to be very tactical with how you contest this pawn.
Yeah. And also, I would love to mention, it's time to start looking at those timers. They've got 2-something minutes apiece here. That was a very, very smart play, right? Going for the queen there. Now, I will say this. Maybe, you don't actually have the privilege of ignoring it, of course, because it is going to reveal a check and then you're going to gain a little bit of tempo. Had the king not been there, had the king been on h7 already or something, you would have been able to actually keep on advancing that pawn, and maybe get something really, really huge off of it. And we're actually going to be seeing the resignation from Callahan here as Nog8Ness takes this game.
That is, we actually see the resignation from black here. It's a white win.
From Nog8Ness, excuse me.
Yeah. So we're 2.5 to a half here. We're in as close as you can be to. We're in a must-win situation now for Nog8Ness. As oh, that is interesting. We have Nog8Ness saying, "I didn't resign there." Uh, ooh, whoa, 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 whoa. We have something happening here. We had and then a draw by agreement. Guys, we need to have a little chat here. What is happening, friends? So we're having a bit of, so the points that you see here, best of uh, hmm, okay. We might
I'm
need
gonna
to
be
be
honest.
referred.
I don't know what's going on. It is a best of
Yeah.
5. We don't actually know who the victor is of that one. I know the points that say clearly it is 3-1, but that would have been Callahan's set if that was the case. They're playing it out. I guess they're going into this one.
Yeah, I'm very interested as to what happened there. Um, we might have to check in with our fantastic admin, um, our fantastic Gen E staff booker. But regardless, we are going to be looking into this, assuming that what they said is true and that they agreed to uh, take a rematch at this point. So we're going to be playing a I am going to be playing off the assumption that it is currently 1.5 to 0.5, as that is what the players agreed on. We will let you know as we learn more as to what occurred and what we are going to be acting off of. But currently it is 1.5 to half a point in my mind. And so we will give you more details as they occur, but we're going to be playing off of that assumption right now, as already this is a little bit more advantageous for Callahan. The center is not as scary, and we're seeing something that they seem to be a bit more comfortable with in the Sicilians, as already a way scarier situation for Nog8Ness, as we see again this bishop pair versus this bishop queen pair, both very, very scary at
Yeah, that
what
bishop
they're
queen pair I
threatening.
don't want to mess with. That thing is brutal. You are holding down the diagonal lane simultaneously. You're simultaneously pressuring those pawns as well. Brutal. That is brutal. I feel like a play here right now for Callahan is to start thinking about that pawn that's sitting at d4, pushing up with a pawn of your own, throwing that thing onto c3. Will be really, really strong here. You can break that up, and then your queen will basically have all of this time in the world that she wants to mess around as needed. Alternatively, you can start getting your rooks into play here. You know, the only thing more powerful than a bishop and a queen stacked atop of each other is to get a rook behind that as well. Callahan not going to be developing or activating that rook that's sitting at a1 quite yet, going in there to back up that bishop just in case they want to, get a little bit more comfortable moving around with their queen. They have to still protect that piece as normal.
I'm interested as to that play there to try and support the bishop, because there is a very real threat of, I mean, this bishop is very scary, and I'd assume that you would want to keep it. But my question would be, if f6, where do you have to go with this bishop? Like, personally, I would want to keep this bishop, and I would not want to have a trade forced on me, even if that meant well, would that be even a trade? If, let's see, if f6, then you really couldn't go to any square. F5 is the play, kicking the queen, trying to boot that away. I'm wondering, there might have been plays with f with bishop takes. Even bishop takes is still a threat there, and we do have have to have a quick refresh. Didn't miss any moves, but there were definitely threats there in terms of bishop takes, and right. Bishop takes, and then you have queen takes e6, which puts check on the king, and it's actually a bad position. We learn things.
Um,
We learn things.
we learn
That
things. Absolutely. But in the meantime, you got to get that queen out of there, right? You got to respond to that pawn pressure in a type of way. I got to say, Nog8Ness is always the one that is taking the first step to really advance their pawns. Sometimes I will say they do get a little bit ambitious with it. They sometimes have pawns that are like isolated, a little bit lonely. But we're actually going to be seeing the bishop back away here. Interesting. I'm trying to think about what they could be possibly avoiding with that. Maybe trying to avoid that bishop going on over to h3 on behalf of Callahan, which would have put in a lot of pressure there. But I feel like right now the play for Callahan is what? Maybe to advance that pawn as well. Nope, instead they're just going to make sure that that bishop is as protected as possible, putting that rook behind the queen, stacking it there, and we'll just have to see where they go from here, from this point onwards.
Yeah, and I think with that bishop rotation there, it's a lot more powerful, protecting some aggression from Callahan from coming in off of the top. But at this point, I'm not sure as to who specifically is going to be taking the aggression here, as there's a lot of really good pressure from this bishop pair, but you could very quickly and very easily see some offensive pressure from Callahan with that battery on the e file, and with potentially moving that king over on the diagonal.
Yeah. I think moving your pawn up there was really, really smart from Nog8Ness. You're just giving that rook a huge lane now to maneuver around. It wasn't very strong. It was just tucked away in that corner, and this is how it actually gets opened up at this point in time. Okay, so little update
Yeah.
from production side. Basically, that last game didn't count at all. And that draw will also not count as points. They're going to have to just individually win games for it to count here. So it is still technically 1-0.
And also a bit of an update as well. We are in HSEL, we are not treating these draws as any points. So it is currently, despite what you may see on the actual chess.com screen, we are treating this as 1-0. We are treating it as though that past game never happened, which is definitely a disadvantage from that's not good. That's really not good for Nog8Ness. They just lost that rook.
They just lost that rook. That bishop ended up sweeping in there. Callahan is now up. What's that bishop doing? What's that bishop doing all the way out there? What happened here?
So at this point, that was a really big misplay there, I would say, from Nog8Ness, as with bishop takes g2, bishop takes a7, rook over queen takes. I mean,
Callahan's up right now. Let's cut to the chase here. Callahan is really up right now. The only thing is that positioning of the king is fairly limited, all things considered. You have that queen that's sitting all the way by herself effectively at d3. But look at the pieces that Callahan still has to play with. An extra rook on top of everything else. Honestly, I mean, that's huge.
It certainly is, and you have to wonder what the plan is here for Nog8Ness. Maybe this was an attempt to get that get the king in an unsafe position, which it certainly has, but the safety is going to be right back as soon as it comes through, the battery established on that C column. But that might have been a fatal misplay for for
Oh, what a
Callahan.
check. This
Ooh.
is potential for a dirty, dirty check here. If you come in and swoop in there and you take that bishop protected by that rook, that was an essential play with that black rook, moving it on over to c7, just as insurance to stop that from happening. But now you also got to scare that queen away. And guess what? When you're up like this in rooks, you can go for all of these kinds of trades. Nog8Ness going to be giving up the queen here, and now you're fighting a queen and a bishop and a rook and a bishop here. This is very clearly in Callahan's favor at this point in time. You got to get out there. You got to scare away some of these pieces. And, oh, man, this is looking tough now for Nog8Ness.
That it is, and some
What a
really big
fork.
trades coming in, and just the pressure from this queen is devastating. That blunder might have just sent Nog8Ness into a potential reverse sweep situation. And with the amount of aggression that's going to come through from this queen, and the ability that it has to be a gigantic nuisance for Nog8Ness, to be a thorn in his side, it's going to be very, very hard to win this endgame.
Gonna be tough. It's gonna be a challenge, and now these pawns are advancing. Of course, with the 12, unless of course the king does get boxed in and locked down here, and this is a really good point in time to get into play as well here from Callahan. Try to pressure that rook. You scare away that rook, and then you know what that means. You get to push up those pawns as well. You take the rook. Congratulations, you've effectively won the game at that point because there's really nothing else that you can do. Nog8Ness is in a tough spot. I don't see how they can win here unless Callahan really messes up.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely still a chance here for Nog8Ness, but that has to be a really tough. This has to be really tough, going from a game that you were very much advantaged in to now a game that you can't get much going with, and you end up just not getting the space that you got beforehand. So it's rough for Nog8Ness, but it looks very likely that we're going to end up seeing that was not the trade that I expected to come through. Definitely an advantageous position for.
Now you get to take that pawn. You get to take that pawn, and you have two white pawns that are effectively on open files. One of them, and you might have been able to force some sort of a stalemate situation by blocking off with your king. But because of the fact that Callahan was up by just a single pawn on that king side, there is really nothing that you can kind of do to get out of that situation. Callahan played that super well. I think that trade was really important to sort of open up the positions. Yeah, you get that rook out of the way, get that rook out of the game, and you're just up enough. So really good stuff to Callahan. Callahan should now be up 2-2 none, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this is now a 2-0 game for Callahan. And at this point, Nog8Ness has to pull out the reverse sweep. 3 victories without letting Callahan take anything, and it has to be hard now.
Callahan's playing good. Callahan is playing really, really good. I feel like right now the biggest difference that I am seeing between the two, Nog8Ness is really aggressive with the pawn structure in the middle game. Right? They're really, really pushing up super far, but it doesn't necessarily always feel justified. Callahan seems to be dismantling those like really pushed up pawns super, super well, kind of getting rid of them. And then once you like whittle down the game to that few pieces, once you get so many of them off of the board, Callahan is the one that's kind of coming out on top consistently over and over again. So we're going now into the match point here, the match game. Callahan is up 2-0 to take it all at the HSEL Nationals. A whole lot on the line here. I'm excited to see the resolution of the set, or if we'll have potentially many more games to come.
That is the question, is whether or not we're going to see this set end right here, right now. I'm excited to see this. Right now we're having a bit of the players figuring out exactly what's happening that we had figured out with the moment. but
A lot of stuff going on. This was a
a
funky
lot
day.
happened.
We had a false resignation that got treated as a draw. We had another draw that didn't get counted point wise. Uh, we've been casting a lot of chess. We've been casting a lot of chess at a lot of games that did not actually add up to the total set count here. So we're just going to have to wait to see what happens in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for your patience in the meantime. And with that being said, we have the game in front of us. Already castling, getting into it. 10 seconds apiece. They're getting past the openings and the early games. Potential final game for both of these players. Potential match point for Callahan. Let's get it.
Already looking into this King's Indian defense. This is the same one that we saw, I believe, a few games ago, with a bit of a different variation now, as both of these players trying to pick something different. As Nog8Ness able to take a lot more of the center. This is really the bread and butter of the King's Indian, is that white does take a lot of control in the center. And if we have seen Nog8Ness take great advantage of having that center pressure, and we'll have to see if they're able to keep going and bring themselves back from the brink now.
Yeah. Right now, the key for Callahan is going to be how do we open up some of these knights a little bit. They're really hindering some of the movement from the bishops. Actually, going to be pushing up the pawn here. I'm interested in what the intentionality or the thought process was. In my mind, maybe the biggest thing was to block off that knight from going on to c5. Either of the knights going on to c5, mind you. Also, we've seen Callahan do this. Well, actually, excuse me, we've seen Nog8Ness do this before, but putting your rook onto a7 like that is really, really strong because of the way it protects those pawns. And then once you do develop that pawn sitting at b7, it gives your rook a lot of room to play with and a lot of mobility. So we're seeing the bishop move on over to b2. We're seeing the queen go on over to c7 as well here, trying to put a lot of pressure down onto that c file.
Yeah, and now, like you said, that C file getting a lot of pressure, but also opening up to some potential pushing this pawn forward onto d5, but advantage going the way of Nog8Ness. Already just seeing the space advantage that we saw in that second game, the one that unfortunately got accidentally resigned. You're looking at what could maybe be a bit of a replay of that, and we might be able to see a comeback from Nog8Ness.
Personally, right now, I think for Nog8Ness, there is a pretty good move here. And that move would be to put that pawn on over to b5. You're effectively pressuring that knight and that pawn simultaneously in a fairly contentious spot. If you force that take, you're going to have a knight that is attacking the queen instead, but we're still going to see that attack on the queen maybe in a little bit of a different way, offering also that knight-to-knight trade as protected by the pawn that's sitting at c4, but this is, potential for a fairly big play here.
Yeah, there's a lot that could go well for a lot of these players, and the queen just going to have to get pushed back again. And this is where Nog8Ness thrives here. With this push forward, with the just aggressive space taking and the knight capture, very interesting. You might see a threat of, if bishop takes, maybe
we're gonna just see trades. They are trading left and right. That pawn got doubled up. That was important because the last thing that I feel like Callahan would have wanted to do was to not only lose both of those bishops, or both the bishop and the knight, excuse me, but then to still have a doubled up pawn, at least you still have that bishop to play with. So I think that was fairly important that they went through that typically unfavorable doubled up pawn, but it felt like the lesser of two evils. In that situation, there's no good answer for sure. You just have one that's going to deduct less of your psyche, I guess.
Yeah, and with just how much pressure that Nog8Ness is putting, you're just seeing the sword of Damocles at this point. You're just waiting for it to fall, for Nog8Ness to really start pushing in. This bishop is just rooted into Callahan's line, and you really can't do much to get it out unless you would want to try and start trading here. But just with how active all these pieces are, the dark squared bishop of Nog8Ness is just infinitely more powerful than the one of Callahan. And this white square bishop is going to try and push in, but it'll immediately get removed as with that pawn to f3. So we're looking
What's
at
the idea
just
behind that? Why
scary.
are they offering that? Because I felt like that would have been actually a pretty decent. Oh no, excuse me, I lied. You have that bishop that's sitting at c6. So now
Yep.
further backing away that bishop, nestling it nice and cozy between those pawns, sitting at h3 in enemy territory, but nothing that can effectively pressure it in time. Right, that bishop does not have a lot of places to go, offering a huge queen trade here, and Nog8Ness is still up, but at what cost? Take a look at the positioning of that rook now. A rook and bishop in tandem, especially if you justify it with a second rook. That's what I see happening right now. I don't feel like this is the time to back away from all the pressure that which you're applying. But if you have a rook to rook on that e-file, that could be huge. Callahan is going to opt to play a little bit safer though, backing up just a little tiny bit here. This would be actually a really good trade if Nog8Ness decided to take it, because it would have also helped to resolve that really nasty doubled up pawn that Callahan has to still deal with.
It is just really rough because not only is that doubled up pawn very, very weak, it is blocking in that fianchettoed bishop on g7, making it pretty much a decorative hood ornament for Callahan. It can really only go to h6, and at that point there's a lot of pressure that can happen. Its only job right now is protecting this f6
Oh yeah.
pawn. This bishop is a fancy looking pawn right now, and there's not much that it can do about it.
I mean, let's put it this way. I feel like if you actually go for this offered rook trade, if Nog8Ness does go for that offered rook trade, what happens here? You put that rook that's currently sitting at d6 and you put it at d8. So you take with a rook and then you'll effectively be able to check. You could theoretically block, but instead Callahan is going to offer a rook trade of their own here, backing up with the bishop as well here, relieving a little bit of pressure just to make sure all of the pieces are nice and safe and sound. And again, they keep doing it. These games are going down to the wire, only up by a single point. Nobody has a very strong advantage or disadvantage. The only thing I want to say, Callahan down a point, but more importantly, that pawn structure is not looking good.
Yeah, no, this pawn structure for Callahan is very terrifying, and with just how much pressure is getting dished out, you may even end up seeing perhaps like a bishop d7 to just try and trade out these bishops to really just solidify the power that Nog8Ness has, and how much and just taking out a strong piece for a strong piece regardless. But you also might not want to lose this light squared bishop. The question is, what will we see? We'll see the bishop b7 to put the pressure on the rook, and this rook takes pawn, but there's that rook into the back line. And with how much pressure is currently getting dished out, there's the skewer
Oh,
onto the
brutal.
rook and the bishop. The rook moves, the bishop is gone. There's just not much you can do here. Countered with the pin. It's brutal out here for Callahan, as Nog8Ness starting to potentially turn things around.
I mean, your only good move here is to what you have to get that king out of the way, right? The reason why the skewer is so especially powerful is because this is a skewer and a pin on top of that. That's a whole lot of kebabs happening simultaneously. You get that king out of there a little bit, you're removing one of those shish kebabs, and then you'll be able to effectively come in there. You can go through that rook and bishop trade. It'll be a little bit awkward, it'll be a little bit ugly, but at least you will still be alive at the end of the day. So the point count right now is even. Putting that king up to g7 is going to result in what? Well, you can have the rook being eaten, and then you can swoop in with that black bishop to take it on the contentious square of c5 right now. You're going to be losing a rook, but at least you'll be alive and in the game. And we will be seeing that move to g7. Really, really smart, disengaging all of that pressure. And that's it. That's going to be the trade that we talked about. Not good point-wise for Callahan at all, but they're alive, and that's what matters.
That it is, but with how blocked in Callahan is, it's not looking good. And now with the bishop trade offer that we've been talking about, there's just not much else that you can do for Callahan. The trade is not going to come in. Callahan is trying to
Yeah.
keep their material on the board, trying to get something, anything going. This bishop pair is the only thing that Callahan is able to really cling on to. But there's the threat onto the pawn. There's not. Bishop b4 is probably bishop b4, bishop b6 is probably the response you're going to see to try and protect this pawn, but you're just going to probably end up seeing the a3 push. If you see bishop b6, there's not a lot you can do to try and protect this pawn for Callahan.
This game is getting. This game is strange. This game is definitely getting a little bit odd here. Yeah, Callahan just definitely does not have like the ideal pawn positioning that they would like. In this situation, of course, going to be trying to protect it. The play here would be probably, yep, of course, to back up that bishop onto something like d8. And the thing is this, being left with two bishops as your last like main pieces is really tough. Because of the fact that you cannot have them actually effectively protect each other. And that, in my mind, is really, really significant here. Swooping in with that rook again, applying all of that pressure, and now you will not actually be able to take that pawn quite yet. That black bishop just still putting in a lot of work, unsuccessfully defending it at this point. Now going to be advancing the pawns here bit by bit by bit. In a way, Nog8Ness did give Callahan a bit of a favor. You're opening up that double pawn structure. Now you can kind of advance with that pawn of your own. You're going to maybe go for the take here, but it's going to result in Nog8Ness having a guaranteed open file.
That it is. And, excuse me, with just how blocked in Callahan's king is and how really unsafe it's feeling, there's not a lot that you can really do with these pawns on the black squares and the white bishop being such a threat. There's a very easy way to checkmate here, getting that white squared bishop over, as long as you're able to push this king into the wall of pawns. That white squared bishop can absolutely allow you to get a checkmate here.
What's the play here? Okay, I guess like you're just trying to get that white bishop out of the way, right? You're trying to pressure it a little tiny bit. Right now, the biggest thing that's scary, wow, they go for the trade. Honestly, not a bad idea. You get rid of that bishop, and guess what? You still have that pawn that's sitting so comfortably at b4 right now. It wants to go up there. That is where I feel like this game will be decided. You can protect it with a rook, which is so powerful. Because there isn't a lot that a bishop can do to successfully contest with that either. You have that black pawn that's sitting at e4, but it's unprotected because of the fact that it's on a white square, and you're only left with a black bishop. This game is not looking good for Callahan at all.
No, it absolutely is not. And with just how, like you said, I mean, that bishop unprotected with a pawn just fully in, with the pawn fully there, you have a mate in 3. And I think we're going to see that happen fairly well, as this pawn or this king just boxed in, now mate in 2.
It's Jover.
Probably gonna be.
Let's put it this way. It's absolutely Jover. We're gonna
It's
have to go to the
Jover.
next game. Yep, that's it, everybody. We're gonna go to game 5. Nog8Ness played this game super well. In my mind. The way that they traded, the way that they ended up trading up. I mean, I will take a rook and a bishop any day of the week over having 2 bishops with me. As like my final like 2 main pieces going into a game, right? Because they don't get to protect each other. They only get to occupy half of the squares on the board, right? On like a very basic level, if you have a knight, congrats, it can hit every square on the board. If you have a rook, it can hit every single square on the board. Having two bishops completely compromising opposite sides of the board in a way, never being able to do their own thing, only moving parallel to each other, you don't have the potential for a lot of plays, not a lot of forks, not a lot of justifications. That was a little bit tough for Callahan at the end. So they're going to be going on to game 5 here, the potentially decisive game if it doesn't go to a draw or a funny little mutual resignation scenario like we had before. So now we're just going to be waiting to hear what happens.
Yeah, and I mean with this position for with this position for Nog8Ness, they have the opportunity now to bring us to their decisive game, as
Yeah.
we're sitting 2-1, and we could end up seeing a definitive game. We could
Yeah.
end up seeing that final game, bringing us 2-2. But you need to keep it going if you are if you're Nog8Ness, you need another win, and you've got the first one. The momentum's on your side, but you have to do it with the white pieces now. You can't or no, with the black pieces, pardon. Because we've seen some struggle with these black pieces from Nog8Ness, or more accurately, we've seen Callahan really excel on white.
Yeah. But in the meantime, I do believe we're going to be quickly throwing it on over to a break while we, for lack of better words, figure out what is going on. So we'll see you guys in just a couple of minutes with potentially game 5 or game 4. So stay tuned for then.
Hello and welcome back. We're here with the finals of HSEL chess. You can maybe even hear it in the background. The pieces are clicking, clacking as we speak. So we're going to hop right back in. We're here with still me, K-Wing, here with still Dara. And we are already off to the races with this Sicilian defense. And on the French variation now, some really good attacks on the center from Nog8Ness, who is, I remind you, currently down 1-2. Do not pay no attention to those scores on chess.com. We had a little bit of a bug coming through, with a refresh bug coming through for Nog8Ness. And so we replayed the game. That game still came out as a loss for Nog8Ness, but now Nog8Ness, starting out down 2-0, is starting to make their comeback. Now 2-1, looking to bring us to 2-2, whereas Mad Irish looking to finish this game off at 3-1 and take home the title of national champion for HSEL.
We've been casting a lot of chess. Let's put it that way. We've been casting a lot of chess. We've had a lot of weird, funny little shenanigans happen. And oh my, at that positioning of the pawn all the way on D3, already on that third row, just pushed in so deep. You don't have a lot of other pieces that are currently pressuring either that row or the column, right? So you got to figure something out there. I feel like not a bad play at this point in time would be to maybe try and bump up that rook on over to e3, just so that you have an extra bit of defense on it. But instead, we will be seeing just a lot more development on the queen side here. We're going to be seeing an attempt to block with that knight as well, also effectively making it more difficult to go for any more plays over on that c4 square. But I will say, still putting up your pawn there. You have a bishop and a pawn protecting it simultaneously. Callahan is definitely down one piece in terms of how many pieces are actually attacking that square. Nog8Ness, again, so characteristic of them. On black, they are aggressive with that pawn positioning. They want to put themselves out there. They're doing it. They're pretty bold for it. The question is, will it work out this time? Will it result in any big pieces, any big trades? Only time will tell.
That is the thing. Only time will tell at this point, as that queen putting pressure onto that knight with the pinning it right straight to the queen, threatening that
Yeah.
queen trade. You put some pressure on the knight, you force the queen trade. But already, Matt Irish putting a lot of pressure out. But like you said, that space, they're getting around it, Callahan. So it's not as
Yeah.
disastrous as it was beforehand. And especially with the queen putting pressure onto c4, you might just see an explosive, some explosive exchanges coming through
Mhm.
on that
The play
c4.
in my mind would be to take that square, to take that pawn with that knight, right? If you can get that bishop out of there, we have seen Nog8Ness again consistently do like that double stacked bishop thing, completely hold down the diagonal files. If you can break up that pawn structure as well, that will be really, really huge for Callahan. So now I feel like Nog8Ness's mindset is like judging, hey, how do I further defend this and actually contest it? And one way in which they will do so will be with that knight, putting it in a very, very strong spot in my mind here, except for the fact that, wait a second, can't you just take with the bishop here?
I don't think so. As there's that threat to the queen. But regardless, we don't see that as knight as the queen exchange comes right through. That bishop though is quite scary. Regardless, as knight's going to go over to the side, it's fairly even for both these players. Not able to find any tactics going.
Oh yeah, big queen trades right from the get-go, exactly what we have, come to know and maybe love for both of these players as well. Again, it's all about that c4 square. You currently have the bishop and the knight protecting it. You got to get some more pieces out there in order to be able to do so. Putting in that bishop maybe to try to force. Honestly, the trade here would be pretty good. You either A, get rid of that knight and then, okay, knight for the bishop, whichever, or B, you scale away that knight and then you can put that rook onto something like b4. b4, you can pressure that pawn that's sitting at c4 and dismantle that pawn structure from Nog8Ness. I think a play here would be definitely to try and bump up one of those rooks that Nog8Ness has chilling on the back line right now. They haven't been activated yet, but they're one piece away from doing so, and they have nice big open files to do that with.
And they certainly do, and especially playing bishop d4, putting that pressure the onto the g7 square for of Nog8Ness. There is a lot of potential there, but you might not have as much in terms of the follow-up. You
Yeah.
might see a bit of a rook lift, getting rook e3 into like rook f3, trying to get some more pressure. But the bishop pair from Nog8Ness, which is something we have seen time and time again from them, by the way, is how deadly that this bishop pair can be and how scary it is, because it has just been providing them, especially with where it is right now. These bishop pairs are just sectioning the board into two sides, and Callahan can really only try and pass through them.
You have to disengage at that point, right? You have to disengage. You have to be able to get that bishop out of there, make sure that no big plays will be had at that point in time. I'm still looking at that b4 spot, honestly. I'm looking at that b4. Actually, never mind. I lied. You can't because of the black bishop and where it is currently sitting. So excuse me for that one in that case. Now, as for what are some like potential tactics here from Callahan, that's kind of like what's on my mind. I'm looking at that pawn that's sitting at e4 presently. Might not be a bad idea to start pushing it up. It will be very nicely, safely protected by both the by both the rook that is sitting there, as well as the black bishop. If you can find another way to protect the pawn that is sitting at c3, it really wouldn't be a bad idea to swoop in and take the pawn that's at a7 and offer up a rook for a bishop trade as well. I feel like that can be a fairly powerful position. Maybe also getting that other white rook down on the same b file as the other one. I mean, having two stacked rooks, very, very powerful. I feel like these are just some potential good positional plays.
That it certainly could be, as this just the like you can just see the effect of the space that that Nog8Ness is taking right now, as these pawns sitting on the fourth and third file, respectively, have just made it
Yeah.
near impossible for this knight to maneuver a lot. And there are so many spaces that it really wants to head out to that it just kind of can't, as now the maneuver has to come through over toward the side to try and get some kind of active role for it heading through, trying to protect this c3 pawn, but puts it in a
Yep.
very rough position.
And now we're seeing that pawn move away, right? Because that original play that I was thinking about of putting that bishop onto a7 no longer as worthwhile anymore if you're not really getting a pawn for all of your troubles. By doing so, right? That's like something that would have been able to happen because it gave the black bishop a little bit of room to move. Now that the pawn at c3 is protected, and now we're seeing the advancement in the pawn structure. Callahan, really, really patient, right? Not really moving those pawns until the very last minute here, and now going in for the rook trade. You're being forced as well simultaneously to get that knight out of the way. You have two places that you can go. You can go to d2, which is going to put some more pressure onto the pawn that's sitting at c4 again. But no, not gonna move it at all, actually. Just gonna say, hey, you can come in, you can take this thing. That's okay because I still got a rook backing it up on e1.
Yeah, and just being able to know exactly what you have and how much is protecting it and whether or not you need to respond to a threat is really important. It is what separates these guys from potentially some of their fallen opponents, might we call them.
Yeah. I feel like that had the potential to be like an interesting trade if Callahan had decided to go for that knight with the black bishop. They didn't go for it at that point in time, instead just now choosing to put the knight onto a3, and they are fighting again and again over that spot on c4. Typically speaking, classic, not a good place for the knight. Doesn't want to be on the edge of the board at all, really, really hindering its mobility.
It absolutely is, and at this point, that knight is just like, this is just so scary. I mean, with the knight able to go one spot and the aggressive push there onto d2, the rook's there backing it up, and there's not a lot of pieces that can really contest it at this point, but just such a statement move. Going to d2, bishop has to go to f3 to prevent any shenanigans coming through on that d1 uh potential to potential to promote, but the knight comes in and already just getting steamrolled right now.
You got to get that thing out of there. And so what is the way that you would actually be able to do so? I'm again looking at that pawn onto c4. If you can scale away that white bishop, then you'll be able to take the pawn at c4. Then you'll be able to actually effectively pressure the pawn that's sitting at d2. But we are getting into a cluster here on the queen side. And also, can't forget, look at what happens here. Uh-oh, that's about to be a knight that might be taken by that black bishop. Is anything protecting it? Not at all. That's going to be a one piece for Nog8Ness here, going up in points and in positioning, and that is going to be the resignation from Callahan. That was a misplay. I gotta say, that knight movement was really, really huge. You reveal the pressure onto Callahan's knight by moving into a knight like that. Too much stuff going on. That thing got pinned down. You lose too many points. And with that being said, I think now we're going to a game 5. I think that was an actual resignation. That was not a misinput. At least I'm hoping so. Please, I'm begging you guys.
We can only hope. There's so much there's only so much that we could do. We're going to have a quick bathroom break for our players who have also been here for quite some time. We started off at around 3, and so now we are going around 3 Central, so 4 Eastern, and we're getting close to 2 hours that we've been. So both these guys are potentially looking at being a bit exhausted. I have to admit, I am getting a bit exhausted as well. But both of these players on the cusp of the championship.
Yeah, something I do also want to quickly mention before we also throw it into a break is This is like fascinating because this is like a very like well and real like studied concept. Anytime like a match or a set goes long in any sort of competitive game, we have to talk and think about something like decision fatigue. And now this becomes truly like a battle of wits, or a test of endurance, excuse me. Who is able to withstand this kind of pressure, being forced to make so many decisions after 2 straight hours of chess gameplay, a little bit of drama with the rule set as well. You gotta keep yourself energized, caffeinated probably as well will be an excellent help here. But with that being said, we'll just jump to another quick little break, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. So don't go anywhere quite yet, and stay tuned. Oh,
Haha.
apparently this entire talk that I had about a break, uh, totally useless. They've started a game. They've jumped into a game. Game number 5 here officially. Actually, 8 games total being played. I don't know what's going on. Game 5. Let's go.
Yeah, game 5.
Oh
Woohoo!
yeah.
We're getting into game 5. It's going crazy. It's going wild. It's going absolutely bonkers. But we're seeing some interesting sort of plays right now as the center is getting fairly well controlled by Nog8Ness, already getting themselves off to a little bit of an advantage here. With the white pieces, has a very interesting response here in the modern exchange variation. Rolling through. I'm interested to see how the center works out for Nog8Ness, because we have seen so much in the way of how uh, in the way of just how strong that this center can be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what a bold play here as well. Callahan going to be offering up, or just actually, excuse me, threatening that knight as well, offering the trade if they don't necessarily do anything by next turn. But more importantly, what's it doing here? It is not letting that knight move out of the way. You got to take a look at that queen that's sitting at D1, and you, under no circumstances, can now move with the knight. That is a very smart play. And that is because the knight is protecting the square that is on d4. If in that position, Nog8Ness decided to go and do something else, and that would have been Callahan coming in with the knight and taking that pawn, guess what? They don't have the privilege of going in with the knight as well. That would have effectively opened up, themselves for an attack from that black bishop, right? So we're going to be seeing a couple of trades here ensue, a pawn, a couple pawns, a bishop, and a knight as well. Pretty even in point count overall at this point in time. So let's see what they got.
That is the question of what do they have now, as you're looking at a really, really scary sort of situation with some overwhelming space going the way of Nog8Ness, and some attempt made by Callahan here to try and even us up and try and bring us
Yep.
to a more even situation, taking that knight, taking away some sort of protection. Queen takes has to be the move there. Now the attempt at a
Much
rook
better than a
trade,
pawn take, right? Avoid that
very
doubled up
much.
pawn.
Yeah, and
Yeah, just
avoid
super,
that
super
G,
optimal.
avoid the G column being a lot more open.
Oh yeah. So now all the knights are gone. They both lost a bishop each. They both have a black bishop to play with. So this game is just about as even as it could be. The biggest difference between the two of them, of course, being what? Uh, I gotta say, Nog8Ness's positioning is looking a little bit better, a little bit more aggressive. Between the two of them, Callahan is the one that's playing back, playing a little bit more second beat, playing a little bit more reserved, and Nog8Ness is the one that's like, hey, I'm putting my pawns out in the center. I'm going to put it all the way out there, and I'm going to force you to continuously make a decision and play in response to that. So it is up to Callahan to deal with that kind of pressure. It is up to Callahan to get Nog8Ness off of them.
That it certainly is. And at this point, you're looking at a lot of different possibilities. But I would say right now, Nog8Ness, with the space that they've been given, hasn't been able to really push forward. You might see some potential maneuvers with the bishop. Yeah, there you go, taking even more pressure and taking a way more active position. Still threatening this h6 move, but also opening themselves up for a potential queen to e3 to potentially show some to push that battery even more onto h6. You might see an opening up of the center or some rook exchange. You are going to see the rook exchange
Mm,
come in, and the pawn can even be used to,
yeah.
yeah, there you go.
I don't know why that was the move for Callahan, if I'm honest. It has now given the pawn a lot of room to play with, a lot of places where it can fairly comfortably go. That pawn sitting at c7, that is a strong place to be in. You're protected by that bishop, and you also have that rook behind it as well, and have it be all the way in the 7 file. This is the aggression that we have seen from Nog8Ness all of these previous games. Just always, always, always going to be looking for that kind of threat and promotion. We're going to be seeing the opt to put the queen on over to d3 here to try and hold down that d lane again. Super, super tense match, and you now have to get that black bishop out of there.
Yeah, you do respect the queen over. A little bit of me would have wanted this queen, the rook, to move over to d1. It's a little bit of a lighter piece, and you also get a lot more control of this file. Bishop e3, and then rook coming in to try and contest this queen. Moves
Oh yeah.
over. I'm very interested with the moves here. Very good play coming through from Callahan to keep contesting here. And it might end up being the time for Nog8Ness to start to take more space, potentially push forward this G pawn or the A pawn. But no, they're going to go
Oh,
in very aggressive onto this queen, attempt to push this pawn forward, and you have to respect
is
it. The
this the
rook
trade?
over. They're gonna keep it going. Might see the queen move out, but might also see the
You either
commit.
put it on an a6 or you go through the trade here. If you go through the trade, I mean, at the end of the day, you still have a pawn and a rook that's pushed up and as well defended as it currently is. And in fact, we're not seeing a decision made quite yet. Nobody's rushing. People are like, you know what? We're going to defend this. We're going to develop this. We're going to wait for the right time to strike. Nobody wants to go down in these trades. This is the potential last game of the entire match, of the entirety of the HSEL, chess nationals here. So a lot on the line. We're going to be seeing Nog8Ness just start to develop the king side a little bit more here, defend that pawn that's sitting on over a4, e4 a little bit more. These games have just been going down they've been tooth and nail. They've been going down to the wire. Let's see how this closes.
They certainly have, and with that push forward, you might see this bishop over here that has been moved from its original position. You might see it try and enter the game here, bishop d6, or you might end up seeing I'm not sure. You might end up seeing maybe even some aggression over with the rook. Try and you're going to keep the rook there. It's
Yeah.
tough here because this situation where it is, yep, there you go, bishop d6, just putting even more protection on the queen, freeing up the rook. And when you have two pieces guarding one piece that only one is attacking, both of these pieces are way more free to react should something happen. Like you have rook b8 available. You have even like bishop a3 in your wheelhouse. Like anything that
Yeah.
you want to do with these pieces can be done, and it doesn't always it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to stay and protect the queen.
So that was interesting from Nog8Ness just now. My question is, are they going to try and get their king to play this game? Because right now, with everything standing the way it is, you don't really get to move around with your pieces a lot. You don't really get to move your queen anywhere else. You don't really get to put your rook in a way that matters. So getting your king into play here is going to give you a pseudo extra piece to start locking down the space here. We're seeing Callahan continue to advance their pawn structure. They're going to go for the take here. This is getting interesting.
It absolutely is getting interesting. And with that, you've seen a lot of the advantage go away. Callahan has now offered up a draw. We'll have to see if Nog8Ness takes it, because if they go to a draw, all that really happens is we switch pieces. And so we go into another round. And we've seen Nog8Ness do very, very well with the black pieces, but with the offer of a draw, it's an interesting maneuver here. It's Callahan thinking that they might do a bit better on the white pieces.
Watched a lot of chess happen. We've watched quite a few games at this point, so it is going to be interesting to see if they're going to go for the draw and then, of course, go to another game because no points end up getting awarded with a draw here. So, I guess we'll
It's
just
a
have to see it.
draw.
It's going to be a draw.
By agreement, we're going to be switching. We're going to be switching it up. We're going to be going to another. What is this now?
9? Is this game 9?
Is
What
it
is this? Is this game
game
8? Is this game
9?
9?
I let me
It's
look.
up there.
It's 4.5 and 3.5. This is game 9. This is game 9. Now, admittedly, some of these games have been short. Like we had the one where it was just offer, draw, agree to draw to get us back to the correct sort of situation. And we already have some very quick moves going on, getting ourselves solidly into the French variation of the Sicilian. But I'm interested to see how, because again, we see Nog8Ness with a bit of a space advantage, and I'm interested to see how they play with it.
We've been watching a lot of chess. I'm so sorry to keep on reiterating that point, but I really want to hammer in that this has been 2 hours of these two consistently outplaying each other. They need to have the mental fortitude of a champion to keep it going here at this point. So right now, again, the same exact dynamic. Nog8Ness is the one that is a little bit more assertive with their pawn positioning at the beginning. Callahan is playing a little bit more reserved at this point in time. Going in with their bishop, going to be controlling the center here, and now going to be stopping any attacks on that rook. Putting your bishop onto c4 would have, probably spelled the end of that rook that's sitting and chilling at f1. And it would have been really powerful. So just a really good preemptive measure.
Yeah, and now a very solid, some really solid play, pushing in more and more space for these black pieces. And you really need to prevent yourself from getting smothered here again if you are Callahan, and they're going to try and pull back and rotate the knight around, but that knight was doing a lot of very important jobs, so you might even see a push forward. You might even see like a c4 push coming in to just wreck the
But if you
queen
do that
side.
c4, the issue is if you go through the pawn take and you go for another pawn take as well, you're going to have that bishop swoop down, and this time it will be completely unattacked and free to sit at c4 as you please, right? So maybe not really going for the c4 quite yet. Instead, going to be trying to get one of the rooks into play. Nog8Ness going to be shoving that thing onto c8 here, protecting that knight just a little tiny bit more. Again, name of the game. How do you dismantle all of these pawns? How do you start attacking these pawns sitting at d4 as well? This has been what Nog8Ness has been winning by. This has been the challenge that Callahan has been struggling to solve, hence why we've had so many draws this far.
Yeah, and you could have maybe seen you might have maybe seen an a4 push there to just undermine that the defense that might come through on b5 if you push c4 on the black side, if you had black push pawn c4. But with h4, it's interesting, and there you go, you have that c4 push. And I'm not sure what we're going to end up seeing. We're going to end up seeing knight.
You can't do that
back.
tick. You can't go through that trade at all. That would have been so in favor of Nog8Ness. So Callahan just going to be keeping that positioning, especially because more than anything, they just want that pawn on b3 to hinder the movement of that white bishop.
Yeah, and again, just pushing forward, you have a very you have h6, which I really do like to make this place even more inhospitable, and I'm going to bring it up. I brought it up every single time, but it has been it's been the sort of facet that Nog8Ness has been leaning on so much to facilitate their control of the space. is this bishop pair. We have seen it time and time and time and time again. These bishops on e6 and e7 have so much control over the space that it's so difficult for any attack to get going for Callahan. They're going to end up trying to push knight to e5, which is interesting. You might end up seeing the exchange here coming out, because that knight is a bit of an annoyance. But yeah, there you go. There is takes.
And now they're contesting over that d4 pawn. That d4 pawn, what am I thinking of here? What am I expecting at this point in time? You could put your own pawn up to c3. I think the key for Callahan here might be to develop those rooks a little bit more. They're not really doing the most at this point in time. Whereas we're seeing the difference between the two come out. Nog8Ness has that rook sitting on c8 that is really protecting that bishop, and when that black bishop isn't there, it's protecting that pawn super, super well as well. So you got to catch up a little tiny bit at this point, I feel.
Yeah, and there's a lot of there's some really big threats here you could potentially see with queen up to d7 for black, but we're going to see the attempt at a pawn break here, which is interesting, trying to open up the center and double up the pawns. My question is, could we see a black push pawn to d3, which is in line with what we've been seeing a lot of? You have
no way to actually attack at this moment. There is no way to to attack the d3 space. But no,
exchange.
We're going to be seeing the take. We're going to be seeing the exchange, absolutely. And now this begs the question. Are we feeling a queen trade? Is that what's happening? Is that what the vibe is? Are we just going to see that bishop sneak down and take that c3 instead? Honestly, it is not particularly advantageous for anybody to initiate the queen trade here, because it does result in the other player able to use that not only as a move to trade queens, but then to reposition the rooks in a more favorable way. If I'm Callahan here, my biggest priority is just getting rid of that pawn that's sitting at c3 that is way out of line, quite frankly. And then if Nog8Ness does go through the queen trade, it's going to also in turn allow Callahan to activate one of those rooks, right? So nobody necessarily wants to be the first one to take here.
Yeah, this pawn just has to go, and there you have it. It's just going to immediately get taken. And you have some interesting moves here with potentially trying to take, but there's an interesting push there, kicking that bishop away, and it goes right back. You have a lot of opportunities here to do some very interesting things, and it's going to be pushed forward onto c3. Queen's going to go over and try and contest this pawn, but really this is
a little bit block its movement, stop it from getting any more confident.
That too. It really just cannot get any further. And this has been such a thorn in Callahan's side that they just can't get rid of at this point. It's so well connected to this to that rook on c8. And now the queen is going to go over to b6.
I think that queen movement from Callahan was actually fairly important, specifically because that entire one go, I mean, it was basically you can't move in it, right? You don't have any ability for the rooks to go anywhere because the queen was just kind of like in between both of them, splitting them up a little bit. And now this is the point where you can get that rook into play. You get that queen out of the way, you give her a little bit of space, you give the rook a little bit of space, and now he is free to do his own thing as he pleases. Going for the rook trade this time around, though, what's it going to be? Going to be the take with the rook as well, and now you have Nog8Ness's rook hammering down that d-file. Super, super powerful, completely uncontested lane that they have all to themselves.
Yeah, and I would say look at all of the pieces here. If you want to see why there is an advantage here for Nog8Ness, look at every single piece that they have here. You have both their bishops pointing directly at this king side. You have the queen making a battery and bearing down on the king side. You have this rook ready to just slam down the D column onto the king side. There's every single piece that is on the board for Nog8Ness is bearing down on that king. And for Callahan, you do have some moves there,
Oh,
and that was an interesting move. Rook takes
what a
after.
position, though. Oh my god, look at the pressure that you're able to exude here. You have that bishop sitting on f2, protected beautifully by that diagonal from the queen. My god, that is nasty.
Oh, it is absolutely nasty right now, as even with that exchange, this king is way more disrupted. You could see the queen potentially maybe even jump over to a5 to try and just get a lot to make these pawns that are on b4 and c3 even scarier, to sort of free them up and make a lot of pressure. There's a lot that could happen right now that could be very not good for Callahan, as the queen's going to go over, put a lot of pressure in. Bishop goes to f4. An interesting move to try and put some get some difficulty into this position, and to help protect this king and make sure the bishop's a little more safe. But Nog8Ness is on the verge right now of taking this finals game and coming out on top and winning this in an incredible reverse sweep. 4 minutes to play, and it might be all over for Callahan.
Yeah, Callahan's gonna have to pull a fast one.
Mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about this aggressive pawn structure, when you're thinking about the amount of pressure that is being exuded by that bishop and the queen simultaneously, this is where you need a very creative option. And nothing is really necessarily jumping out to me at this moment. I have a thought. You might want to, put your bishop on over, and maybe previously before the pawn moved, offering a really risky positional trade here, giving up that bishop for the pawn at d2 would have been a really risky play, but it would have effectively decimated that pawn structure. Now, you have that pawn that is being blocked by the queen. It feels like the queen is overqualified for this position that she's in right now. It's like she wants to get out there, she wants to do stuff, and she is just being forced to deal with this intern of a pawn, just forced to block it and stop it from being promoted right now. Callahan's position is not looking the best at this moment.
Yeah, and at this, you have a lot of threatening moves here. Everything's very threatening. You could potentially see trying to kick this bishop away off of f4, and then jumping in and trying to pressure this queen out to get it out of the way, and to ensure that, yeah, there you go. G5, get this bishop out of my sight. Trying to move that away, but there is the ability of pawn takes, bishop takes, still protecting, and then the pawn push again. You can take it, but then you lose your protection on the queen, and you could see a very
That
quick
diagonal is
bishop
so
e3.
important.
It
Now, I
really
feel like it
is.
is fairly important to preserve that, because even if the queen does move away, at some point you will have to move away that queen. What's really important is it stops the potential promotion as well. That c1 spot is where maybe this game is going to be defined from, right? So, there's a lot of pressure on the board right now. This is looking really, really scary. They both have similar diagonal potential here on the black diagonal files. Alas, the queen is not in a position to really make a play here. Honestly, if you reposition that bishop to a spot even h6, that means that you have the potential for a check here, aside from the pawn that is sitting there, of course. So this is looking a little bit risky. This is looking a little bit spooky. Let's see what they got.
Ooh, this is not looking good there.
No.
You just don't have much that you can do. There's a lot going on here. Potential for this to all fall apart in the next few turns. I mean, with the move to bishop h4, it's just scary. there's really not much you can do. This queen has to move. It just can't it can't just stay there. I mean, the only thing you can maybe I really don't know
There's
what
not a
else
lot of
you
good
have.
places to go.
There really isn't.
The only way that Callahan would have been able to get some tempo back was to get a check going, to just force Nog8Ness to play defensively just a little bit. Because that Black Bishop, the way that that thing was set up, I mean, there was potential for that. And now, look at what you have to deal with. Is it over? Is this it? Is this going to be the queen trade and then you just take with a bishop? You have two bishops again. These are not the final two pieces that you want to have. They can't do a lot on their own, I have to say. They can really try to maybe back up the king and try to get a check going, but when Nog8Ness has so many pieces to play with still, it's so hard to get any momentum at this point in time. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's just going to be up to Nog8Ness to execute this endgame, to not
Yeah.
blunder. That's going to
Mate
be
in
one check.
3.
That's going to be the block. This is it.
Bishop G2. You have the move Queen D1 to potentially seal the deal here. It's so close right now. They're going to move to Queen F. We're going to move Queen F2. There is some counterplay here, but you still have the forced mate in 3. Depending on where they go, there's a lot of potential here. Nog8Ness just has those last few moves. G4 pushes up again, mate in 3. The possibility here, you want to go probably bishop F4 to push this king outside of that comfort zone. There you have it. Mate in 2, king over, queen down, bishop, mate in 1, queen takes F1, and that is it. Nog8Ness, starting from a cavernous deficit, climbs up, stands now on the precipice, on the summit of greatness as our champion of the HSEL Nationals for chess. They have done it in an incredible, technically 9-game best of 5 set. They are your champion.
Yeah, that was really well played at the end. I have to say, what really won this entire set, I feel like just sort of the story that we're seeing in those winning games again and again and again and again has just been consistently the pawn positioning, the aggression, and the pressure that was actually landed from, of course, all of that pawn pressure that Nog8Ness is putting out there, right? Just by pushing out those pawns so far, pushing out those pawns so deep. I mean, it just felt like Callahan was boxed in. Callahan couldn't get the pieces out onto Nog8Ness's territory to be able to get something going. We didn't see Callahan actually execute a check that entire last game, if I am not mistaken. They were playing from a back foot, which felt fairly early on into that game 5. That game 5 felt like it was the most decisive of all of the games that we've had thus far, really speaking to Nog8Ness's adaptation and just the ability to stay present, to stay mentally present within the game, to stay energized, to stay aggressive, and to stay pressuring. So once again, congratulations to Nog8Ness for being able to take it all.
Yeah, and at that point, at this point, you really have to just applaud the ability of Nog8Ness to not only stay the course for what is now an almost 2.5-hour series, which is very difficult, especially in chess, which is such a mental heavy games, which is so it's so difficult to play this many games this quick. It's really tough to keep that going for so long, and with 8 total games played, not counting the technical 9th that we had to swap pieces, 8 games of chess in a row for the national championship for HSEL has to be so draining.
Yeah.
And you have to applaud Nog8Ness, and it looks like very shortly, we're going to be able to talk to the man himself and get a little bit of how they're doing after that incredible comeback, and how they were able to keep everything going. So we're going to get a quick interview, but when we come back, we're going to have Nog8Ness on, and we're going to ask them a few questions.